Hello and welcome to Hughes of the World. I hope I'm actually streaming out here. I don't know if I am. I hope I am. I think I am. I have no proof whether I am or not, since my computer's gone a bit mad. But that's okay. I'll give it a moment and see if you can see me. If you can, great. If you can't, oops. I'm still seeing if I'm coming up on the streaming or not. Bear with me for a moment. Yes, it looks, yes, I'm here. Whew. God, that took a while, didn't it? I'm supposed to have super fast internet broadband. Anyway, hello everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Hughes of the World. This is episode 46, and we're going to be diving into the Democratic Republic of Congo. Big shout out to all the lovely people who are already here on the chat. We've got Martin Harrow there, we've got Diz, we've got Benjamin, we've got Paul, we've got Saz, we've got Anne, we've got Simon. We've got Sarah. How you all doing? How you all doing this evening? Let me know in the chat. If you'd like to join our friends in the chat here, all you need to do is hit that juicy subscribe button and we'll all have cake. Well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe some of us will have something other than cake, but it's all good. It's all good. Hi, Graham. Can see you okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you, SG. Technical, you press go live and it says, oh, we can't just start this broadcast now. You've got to press another button. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll press that. And then on my feed on YouTube, I wasn't coming up. Anyway, right, let's get into it. Hello, my name is Graham Hughes, and welcome to Hughes of the World, in which we take a deep dive into every country in the world in alphabetical order, one country per week, until the heat death of the universe, or until we get to the 201st country. I think we're going to do 201 episodes in this series, and we're up to episode 46 tonight. We're in the Democratic Republic of Congo, often shortened to the DRC. It's a country of breathtaking scale, staggering resources, and seismic historical weight. It's the second largest country in Africa after Algeria, and it's home to the Congo River, rainforests, volcanoes, and some of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. It's a land of contrasts. It's rich in minerals, and yet it's one of the poorest countries on earth. It's culturally vibrant, and yet politically unstable. It's haunted by colonial atrocities that still shape its modern reality. The DRC is bigger than all the countries of Western Europe combined. It is absolutely huge. It is the size of Spain, France, Germany, Sweden, and Norway put together. It borders nine, count them, countries, more than any other African nation. It's over 60% of the Congo Basin rainforest lies within the DRC, making it a critical carbon sink for the planet. The Congo River is the deepest river in the world, and second only to the Amazon in its flow. It's a big one. It's a big one. The DRC is the world's largest producer of cobalt, coltan, which is essential for smartphones, for batteries, for EV vehicles. The V in EV stands for vehicle, Graham. So let's just say EVs, cars, electric cars. Absolutely essential, and it's one of the reasons why, and we'll get into this later, the DRC is still unstable to this day. It's also home to mountain gorillas, okapis, bonobos, and pygmy elephants. Mount Nyiragongo is one of the most active and dangerous volcanoes in the world, and it has a lake of molten lava on top, which is quite cool, but dangerous. Please don't go up there. The word Mokala Mbemba refers to a legendary creature said to live in the Congo, often called Africa's Loch Ness Monster. The riverboat journey down the Congo River is so long it can take weeks and often includes makeshift villages on the boats themselves. The UN's largest peacekeeping force, which is called MONUSCO. I don't think they call it that, but yeah, MONUSCO. MONUSCO. Has been deployed in Congo now, in DRC, for over 20 years. Should we have a look? Should we have a look at the old geography? Should we step into the geography? What's so significant about Greenwich? I don't know. I don't know what it's got to do with the DRC. But, you know, Greenwich Mean Time is in Greenwich. It's in London. It's basically London Mean Time, but they didn't want to call it that for some reason. Because the observatory was in Greenwich, wasn't it? In London. It's a suburb of London. Anyway, moving back to the DRC, we'll head over to have a look at the map of the DRC. Here we go. So this is the world. Oh my God, look at that beautiful planet. Look at that beautiful planet that we're currently messing up something rotten. Those lovely swirly clouds there at the bottom of South America. So this is Africa. And look how much of Africa is taken up by the DRC. It's where that red and white dotted line is. Look at that. That is a big old chunk of Africa there. And we'll zoom in a bit more and you'll see there's this little narrow bit that goes to the sea down here. And if you zoom in even more, you'll see this bit here, Cabinda, this bit here. That's actually, I'll have to zoom out a bit more so you can see it. See this border here? It looks like a little tiny country, but it's not. It's part of Angola, which I'll make the text bigger for you. Look, aren't I nice? It's part of Angola, actually, this little bit here, surprisingly. So, as you can see, bordered by 9 countries. Angola, Republic of Congo, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, and Zambia. The border with Angola is open. The border with Republic of Congo is open. You can get across there, across the Congolese River, the Congo River, which goes along this border here until it gets to about here. I don't know if you can see this very well on the map, but then it comes down through the Congo. So this is all the Congo Basin. But up till this point, around this point here, that's the Congo River going up and away. Africa is huge. Yeah, it is. Africa is absolutely mammoose. It is huge. So you've got the Congo Basin here, which is lowland rainforest and wetlands. You've got mountains to the east along here, where Rwanda and Burundi. You've got high plateaus in the south and the southeast down here towards Tanzania and Zambia. And you've also got numerous lakes that exist in the Democratic Republic of Congo, such as Lake Tanganyika, which is over here. And you've also got Lake Albert and Lake Edward as well, which are over here. So as I was saying, the border with the Republic of Congo, you can get across from Brazzaville here to Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo. But it's a bit, I mean, it's not dicey. It's only a short journey, but it's like whether it goes on time is another matter. And then we have over here, we have the border with the Central African Republic, I believe, is closed at the moment. South Sudan is definitely closed. The border with Uganda is closed. The border with Rwanda and Burundi is closed. The border with Tanzania, I think you can get across Lake Tanganyika over here. It's this very long lake that goes along the border here. I think you can get across there in a boat, but yeah, good luck with that. You can get into Zambia and you can get into Angola. I know you can get into Angola because I did that myself. Right, so if I zoom in a little bit more, you'll see Kinshasa. This is the capital. Now, as in like a lot of places that's similar to this, you know, there's a big hive of activity near the sea, but as you get further inland and into the jungle, the actual places where people live become very few and far between. A lot of these places will only have a few hundred people living in them. They're quite sparsely, spartanly populated. However, the population of the DRC is actually over 100 million people. So, you know, it is a pretty big country in more ways than one. The orientation here, we've got the dense tropical jungle, as I said, in the north. So you can see where Equatorial Guinea is here. That's a good signal of where the equator is. Unfortunately, the equator isn't marked on this map, which is kind of annoying. But just imagine a line going just under Equatorial Guinea, because the equator does not pass through Equatorial Guinea. And you draw that line straight across here, straight through the DRC, through Uganda, through Kenya, and out the other side. That's the equator there. So this is all very equatorial, very full of rainforests, very green, very wet, very hot. If I zoom in a little bit more on Equatorial Guinea here, you can see Sao Tome and Principe there. The equator does actually run. I think it runs between these islands, or it runs like pretty much straight through Sao Tome there. So I once took a boat from Libreville here in Gabon over to Sao Tome and Principe, or Principe, and then headed back. And I crossed the equator several times on that journey, because if we sailed there, we had to tack back, which is when you go in a zigzag fashion. So apparently I angered King Neptune a lot on that journey, and I had to make recompense. But there's Gabon, which is, it's quite cute, this, right? So look, you've got Equatorial Guinea here, and that's nestled, it's like cradled in Gabon, and then Gabon, in turn, is cradled by the Republic of Congo, which was old French Congo, and then all of it is cradled by the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's like a little babushka doll of countries. So get your orientation. Get your orientation. Mountains in the east, yeah, and then we've got high plateaus in the south and southeast, and the lakes and everything. Dense tropical jungle in the north, mountains and lakes, and here, if I zoom in over here, you'll find a place called Goma, which is right on the border with Rwanda. Goma is where everything is kicking off at the moment. We've had forces coming over the border from Rwanda and taking the place over, because this area around here is Cobalt City. It is Cobalt Ground Zero. It is where the coltan, which is cobalt tantalum, maybe, or tantalite. Someone should look that up. I probably should have looked it up before I started. It's in everyone's electronic products, and there's there's battles going on for who controls it, because it is a bit like Spice from the June series. It is who controls cobalt controls the world. So the people of Rwanda, or the president of Rwanda, who's not a very nice man, he wants control of that, which I think is a bit shit. But there you go. So what else have we got? We've got the we got in the mining belt down in the south here. Oh, hang on. I'm looking at the wrong thing here. This is the mining belt down here. Lots of mining operations going on, which create problems in their own right, because you have issues with miners who are coming from as far away as Lesotho down here, surrounded by South Africa, working in this area, and they'll leave their families for 6 months, 8 months, maybe a year at a time, and they'll sleep with prostitutes, and it causes AIDS to be spread a lot around these sort of communities, especially when they come home. It's not a great situation at the moment. Not made a situation not made any better by the fact that the Americans are pulling out all the aid for these places. So yeah, think about it like west. This is where Kinshasa is, and the Congo River mouth. Over here in the north, you have the Congo Basin. It's very much like the Amazon of Africa. Over here in the east, by the borders of Rwanda and Burundi, this is where you have a lot of instability. The Lord's Resistance Army, do you remember Joseph Kony? He was running around here. We'll talk in a bit about the wars that were fought just 25 years ago, which resulted in the deaths of millions of people, and that was caused by a spillover of refugees from Rwanda into Congo, and the instability that subsequently happened. Obviously, it's equatorial, the climate, by the equator. It's hot, humid, and rainy. It's a tropical savanna in the southern regions. I mean, down here in... sorry, I'm trying to move the wrong map here. Down here, like Botswana and Namibia, this is desert. You know, you're getting down to desert at this point. And you see this all across the world. Like, the area around the equator, which gets sun all year round, is always very, very tropical. It's always very green. Obviously, you've got the Brazilian rainforest there. You've got the Amazonas. You've got the rainforest there. And then you've got countries like Sri Lanka and Singapore. You've got Jakarta, Indonesia, and Borneo, the island of Borneo here, which is slap bang on the equator. The equator actually goes through Pontianak here. So if you're following the equator across the world, if you go to Pontianak, you can stand on the equator. And that means that this area is all very, very tropical. But if you happen to live on the Tropic of Cancer, which runs, if you look at Egypt here, see this line at the bottom of Egypt here, this line at the bottom of Egypt, south, that's essentially just a bit north of that is the Tropic of Cancer. You got desert. That's all desert there. You get absolutely scorched in the summer, and then it's freezing cold in winter. And then if you look at the bottom half, where the Tropic of Capricorn comes through, again, this is desert. So you got the deserts of Namibia, you got deserts of Botswana. It's a bit more tropical on this side of Africa, but it's still quite dusty. And then if you run all the way across the world, you can see Australia, the Tropic of Capricorn cuts through the middle of Australia, and it's why you have the very dry centre of Australia. So just a bit of geography lesson for you there. If you want greenery, if you want rain, if you want lots of lush tropical rainforests, You want to hang out in the equator, man. That's the place to be. So the time zone here is GMT +1 in the west. And in the east of the country, it is GMT +2. You can see the United Kingdom there. The line of zero longitude runs down here and ends up in the sea here where it meets the equator around here. So yeah, we're just 1 hour ahead of GMT here, and then over here we are 2 hours ahead of GMT. The capital is Kinshasa, which I've already mentioned here. You can see some photos of it, I guess, if they want to show us some photos. It's just a city. It's just a city. It's not a particularly attractive city. It is just very much a city. So there you go. It's bustling, it's chaotic, it's creative. It's known for music, politics, and street culture. And it's across the river from Brazzaville. Now, if I'm very clever, I might be able to zoom us in here and see Brazzaville. There you go. Brazzaville and Kinshasa. So Brazzaville is capital of the Republic of Congo. And Kinshasa is the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Two different countries. They are the closest capitals in the world, if you don't include Rome and Vatican City. There you go. So the environment, it is one of the most biodiverse places on Earth, but it is critically endangered by deforestation over here there's the river, by the way, that light color there, that's the river. It goes round and then it goes down, okay? So it's called bends around. This is the Congolese basin, or the Congo basin. Deforestation in this area, illegal mining around here, and poaching cause a lot of problems for arguably the most biodiverse place on Earth. It is home to the Virunga National Park and the Solonga National Park, and they're both UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Well worth checking out if you ever get there. I don't know if I'm going to sell this. Hello everyone. I'm back. So yeah, it drives. Money. They use the Congolese franc in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but the US dollar is widely accepted in cities and for larger purchases. I found that it was easier to have euros on you, to be honest with you, but that was just my experience. Inflation and cash shortages are common. It drives on the right, which don't forget, a lot of places in southern Africa drive on the left. So South Africa, Lesotho, Swaziland, Eswatini, they all drive on the left. And a lot of the countries to the north of Africa and Central Africa drive on the right. The flag here, blue background, represents peace. The yellow star, which has been covered by my Hughes of the World stamp, is symbolizing hope. And the red diagonal band means say it with me, blood of the martyrs. Oh, yes. And the yellow around the red symbolizes prosperity. It might actually be gold. It might be gold. I remember, this is how much I hold a grudge. About 25 years ago, I was playing a game of Trivial Pursuit against me dad. And he said, what are the colours? What are the colours of the German flag? And he had a little think. And I said, it's black, red, and yellow. And he went, no, it's black, red, and gold. And he wouldn't let me have it. True story. This is the same guy who wouldn't let me have Steinbeck for Who Wrote the Grapes of Wrath. He went, no, it's John Steinbeck. You can't have it. That literally happened. So, yeah, if you think I'm an arse about when I do quizzes on this channel, my dad was something else. The national anthem, which I will play for you if you like. Would you like to listen to the national anthem? Should we listen to the national anthem together? Okay, I'll just set this up here. This is called Debut. It looks like debut, but not debut as in the first time you do something. This is debut Congolese, which means arise, Congolese. It's a call for national unity and dignity. It was adopted at independence in 1960. Should we have a listen? Do you want to have a listen to the national anthem of the DRC? I'm going to play it for you now because I is nice like that. Just give me a moment. Just give me a moment to adjust my wellies. Here we go. Hopefully you can hear it. Not hearing anything. That's not good. Right, give me 1 second. Oh, Oh, no, it's just taking a second to come on, maybe? Oh, yeah, it was. Sorry, that was my fault. I thought that it wasn't playing the music, but the music hadn't started yet. So let's go over to the national anthem. There we go. That's better. It's more professional, isn't it? And there you go. Arise, Congolese. That's my fate. United in the struggle for independence.
Stressant nos fronts, longtemps courbés, et pour des
But now for good, let's keep moving boldly ahead in peace. Yes, it's French. I gotta say, it's not my favourite. Much prefer the Czech national anthem. We shall people your soil and ensure your greatness. Gentle son of the 30th of June. Covering up the lyrics here, this is very professional. Oath of freedom. That we have on to oh, that's nice, isn't it? Okay, I like that at the end. I like the end bit. I like the end bit better than the middle bit. There you go. That was the Congolese national anthem, sung by the Congolese national anthemers, or something, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, that is in French because it was the Belgian Congo. So one of the state languages is French. That's the official language, actually. Lingala is spoken in Kinshasa and in the river areas. Swahili is spoken in the east, and also Shulaba and Kikugo is spoken elsewhere as well. So yeah, that was Arise Congolese, which was written in 1960. The population, as I said earlier, is around 100 million people, but censuses are hard to do. These places are very, very remote. When I was staying in Kinshasa, I stayed with a pilot who flew light planes, to the middle of the Congolese jungle where there's no roads and the streets have no names because there's no streets. There's paths and things like that, and there'll be a clearing to land, and it's a good place to cut your teeth when you're learning how to fly, because you've got to do X many hundred hours of flying before you can get your professional commercial license. So some young people decide to go out and fly. Yeah. So yes, Congolese pilot, very cool. Not Congolese, she wasn't. She was from France, French. So moving on, there are 100 and there's over 250 ethnic groups in Congo. There is the Congo with a K. There's the Lumba, the Mongo, the Hutu, the Tutsis, who you might have heard of because that's what the fighting was all over in Rwanda in 1994. And there's the Teke as well. The culture and lifestyle in Congo, in Democratic Republic of Congo, family and community are central. Vibrant music, dance, and fashion scenes, especially in Kinshasa, are there. They've got the people called the Sapeurs, which are Congolese dandy culture. It's something that you get in Brazzaville, and you also get it in Kinshasa as well. It's men in flamboyant designer suits, often in a stark contrast to the poverty in which they live. A lot of people live. For sports, football is king. The national team are called the Leopards, and their historic win, they won the African Cup of Nations in 1968 and 1974 when the country was still called Zaire. Boxing and basketball are also popular, and the DRC produces athletes who play abroad, i.e. Romelu Lukaku is of Congolese descent. So, freedom of press. It's restricted, especially in conflict zones. Media is heavily influenced by political interests, and radio is the most accessible form of media for most people, but that is very much changing with the advent of cheap smartphones that allow people to get onto the internet. The religion is 90% Christian, and it's split between Catholic and Protestant. Great. There's also Islam, there's the traditional beliefs, and the syncretic churches of Africa are also widespread. Religious leaders often play political and social roles. Are they face-eating leopards? Asked Anne Phillips. Yes. People need to stop voting for them. The DRC is known for its not just its traditional wood carvings and masks and sculpture, but also for contemporary painting, and there's a lot of street art in Kinshasa as well. The architecture ranges from colonial ruins. There's not much left of the old days of the colonial rule by the Belgians, and there's post-independence concrete monstrosities. Sorry, I'm not going to dick about on this. I hate brutalism. I hate the fact that this fascistic, white, European style of making buildings has been forced upon all these countries around the world, absolutely decimating the local indigenous people's way of building that they have had for centuries. Ways of building that do not require air conditioning because they sussed that. They sussed out how to keep the houses cool. They sussed that shit out a long, long time ago because they lived in these places. And then Whitey turns up and says, no, what you want to do is just make everything out of concrete, right? Which is terrible for the environment and looks shit. And then what you want to do is slap a load of air conditioning units filled with Legionnaire's disease on there and then just paint the place in asbestos. Anyway, one of the makes my it's the one thing that balls my piss. If I ever get to be on room 101, concrete is going in room 101. I fucking hate it. Just lazy. It's the laziest, shittest way of building something, and it's imperialism. It's Western, misogynistic, fascistic imperialism. All your architecture is belong to me. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what it is. We're going to make it look. We're going to make all of your cities look like our cities in Europe or in Eastern Europe. Let's be clear. You know, ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, food and drink. Cassava dough, which is called fufu. Fufu, F-U-F-U. That is a staple of the diet over there, along with rice, plantain, and maize porridge. Popular dishes include ma'abe, chicken in peanut sauce, which is lovely. Cassava leaves, which is called sakasaka, and also brochettes, which are grilled meat skewers. I had a bunch of them when I was there. The drink, the main drink of choice there is called, the main beer is called Primus beer. So if you see a Primus beer label, it's from the DRC. Also, people drink palm wine, which is not great. Palm wine is more, it's not like a wine, it's more like a spirit. It gets you really drunk. And one of the reasons why I feel like I was thrown in jail for 6 days, or held in a jail cell for 6 days over the water in Brazzaville, was because there were police when I arrived in Brazzaville and it was dark. They'd been drinking all day and they were a bit pissed when I turned up, and I freaked them out because, like, why is this European guy turning up on a 18-wheeler in our city? So yeah, palm wine, and also local spirits like Lotoko, it's called, which is basically jungle gin. There were some amazing festivals in DRC. There's the Pan-African Music Festival called FSSPAM at FESPAM. There's also Kinact, which is a street art and performance festival in Kinshasa. Their Independence Day is celebrated on June the 30th. You might have noticed that in the national anthem. They actually make reference to it. It's often marked with parades, speeches, festivities, drinking. In the cinema, war and hardship have disrupted the local industry, but there is a growing indie scene. If you're actually in Congo, you'll see a lot of like locally made stuff on the TV, although a lot of the stuff they get over there really is Nollywood films from Nigeria, which pump out films like you would not believe. But yeah, Nollywood is massive all across Africa. If you want to watch a documentary about King Leopold II, who I'm going to get to in the history section of the show. There's a documentary called White King, Red Rubber, Black Death, which is well worth checking out. There's another one about the modern conflicts of Congo called This is Congo. And DRC is underrepresented globally, but it has immense storytelling potential. In literature, the books that you want to look out for are King Leopold's Ghost, and also from people who are from Congo. We've got Sony Labu Tensi, and Emmanuel Dongala and Veronique Tadjo. They're amongst Congolese or Congolese descended authors. And Fiston Mwanza's Majilas. Tram 83 explores post-colonial Kinshasa life in a surreal, jazz-inspired prose style. The sites to see in Kinshasa, I'm going to have to chuck on a little bit because we're at sort of 34 minutes past already, and I've got a lot to get through. We haven't even started the history yet. Kinshasa, like I say, there's vibrant street life there. There are museums to see. There's churches, there's music, there's art markets. In the national parks, there's gorilla trekking, active volcanoes to check out if you're feeling brave. There's Garamba and Salonga, which are incredible, quite hard to access. And then there is the Congo boat river journey if you want to live out your Hearts of Darkness, Apocalypse Now fantasies, because Heart of Darkness was set in the Belgian Congo. It gives an unforgettable and very rough experience if you want to go and do that. Typical costs for budget travelers range between about $20 and $40 a day outside the major cities. For mid-range, you can expect to spend $60 or $100 a day. But the high costs really are for visas. Transport can be quite surprisingly expensive sometimes. It depends where you're going. If you're on a route that the locals take, it's cheap as chips. If you go on a route that only tourists take, it's going to be expensive. And also getting to remote areas of the jungle might require a light aircraft, a helicopter, who fucking knows, it might be expensive. The other thing that can be quite expensive is permits for parks. And the way they do it is, if you want to go and see the gorillas, you'll be in a group, and you'll have a certain set time that you can go there, and you might not see any gorillas. You might not see any. You might pay all this money to get to the DRC, to climb up a mountain, to go and see the mountain gorillas, and you won't see any. I had a friend of mine who went to Rwanda to see the mountain gorillas, and it was only on his third journey to Rwanda that he actually saw them. Travel warnings are in place for Eastern DRC, the whole of the Eastern DRC pretty much, but especially around Ituri and North Kivu and South Kivu. They're active conflict zones. Don't go anywhere near them. Armed groups, banditry and kidnappings are common. Roads are often in very, very poor conditions, and government checkpoints can be unpredictable. Like, what do they want? Do they want a $5? Do they want $100? Do they want, something else? For gay and lesbian travelers, which is something I should talk about more on the show, homosexuality is not criminalized in DRC, but it is still socially taboo. So LGBTQ plus travelers should be just very discreet, especially in rural areas. Getting there and away, the main entry to the airport is in Kinshasa Njili International Airport, which is airport code NDJ. But if you're coming in overland, you can come in from the Republic of Congo. As I discussed earlier, you can get the ferry across from Brazzaville to Kinshasa, or you can come from Uganda, Rwanda, Zambia. Those crossings are open and closed depending on which day of the week it is, and they're all Uganda and Rwanda at the moment are particularly risky. I wouldn't be going anywhere near Goma or that area at all. If you want to go and visit somewhere in the DRC at the moment, visit Kinshasa. That'll do. You can get into Zambia. But it means going south through the country, and the roads are absolutely terrible getting from Kinshasa down to that southern border. Visas are required for most travelers. They must be obtained in advance, preferably from your home country, but you can get them in neighboring countries. You need a yellow fever certificate. You need your jab. You need your routine vaccinations. You need malaria pills, so malaria prophylactics. I recommend doxycycline. That was good for me, but there's a few different types of malaria tablets that you can take. Some have different effects on you. Lavium, I think it's Lavium. I've forgotten what the name is now. It's so long ago. Can cause some of them can cause side effects for you. And what doctors try and do is give you one of the 3 or 4 different prophylactic pills to take against malaria, to stop the mosquitoes becoming resistant to. If everyone was taking the same prophylactic, there's a risk of the mosquitoes in the area becoming resistant to it. Just to say, when you take malaria pills in these places, it's not for you, dickhead. Okay, not calling you a dickhead. I'm just saying people who don't take their fucking pills when they go on holiday, they really piss me off because it's not about them. You know, if you get malaria as a white Western traveller, you'll be fine. You've got travel insurance. You'll be helicoptered off to a fucking airport, to a hospital. They'll look after you. You're very, very, very unlikely to die of malaria. But here's the thing, right? If you have malaria and you get bitten by a mosquito, that same mosquito will then go and bite all the other people who are staying in the same house or the same room as you. And if that includes children, that will give the malaria to children. And millions of people die every year. Millions of children die every year from malaria for that reason. So take your prophylactics, bloody get a mosquito net around you. It's not about you. It's about those mosquitoes getting the disease from you and then giving it to someone else. I know it's not a disease, it's a parasite, but you know what I mean. Right, let's get into the history of the place. I've got 20 minutes to tell the entire history of Congo. Let me take a drink of water first. We're going for a deep dive. This might be a long episode. It's fine. I got out of jail in Congo, Brazzaville, and I didn't want to film much when I got over the river because I was just terrified of being thrown in jail again. So I just sort of kept my camera sort of tucked away until I escaped to Angola. I don't have much footage of me walking the streets of Kinshasa. So in lieu of that, I'm going to have a deep dive into the history. So pre-colonial Congo before 1885. The area that makes up DRC, as we've seen, includes vast rainforests, savanna, highlands, and river networks, particularly the Congo River, one of the world's largest and most navigable rivers, which serves as a lifeblood for trade, communication, and empire. Early human habitation. We have evidence of human activity in Congo, in the Congo Basin, from 80,000 years ago. By 2000 BC, Bantu-speaking peoples began migrating into the Congo Basin from West Africa in waves known as the Bantu expansion. They brought with them ironworking, agriculture, livestock, ceramic production, and a clan-based governance system or systems. These Bantu-speaking communities eventually displaced or absorbed the hunter-gatherer groups that were already there, including the ancestors of the modern-day Twa, or pygmy peoples, many of whom still inhabit the region today. So if you meet some pygmies, they'll be from the very north of the Democratic Republic of Congo. You get some from the Congo, you get some in Gabon, you get some in Cameroon, and they are a distinct group. They are a distinct group of people who are small, and they're really cool. I met a few while I was there, and the people I met were lovely. They were lovely. One thing that they got wrong in Lord of the Rings, though, is that when you have a person who is small, in that way, so then they don't have like dwarfism. It's just they're small people. It means their vocal cords are quite short, so as a result, they have high pitched voices. And I couldn't recommend enough the how could I put this? The pygmy yodeling songs, the songs of the pygmies. Which are just fantastic. It sounds like pygmy yodeling. You can get CDs of it while you're in Congo if you fancy, if you're into that kind of thing. It's quite interesting. So yeah, the major kingdoms and political structures that started around sort of the 1300s, 1390. We had the Kingdom of Kongo, which started around 1390. This was founded by the Bakongo people in what's now Western DRC, Northern Angola, and the Republic of Congo. The capital was called Mbanza Congo with a K. It was a highly organized city, and it was led by the Mani Congo, that was the title of the king. It was called the Mani Congo. They had a centralized bureaucracy, tribute system, and a professional army. In the 15th century, the Congo had contact with the Portuguese, who arrived in 1483. The Congo elite converted to Christianity and they adopted European-style titles and sent emissaries to Europe. Congo kings like Alfonso I in the early 1500s tried to limit the slave trade, which ultimately undermined the kingdom. The Congo was gradually weakened by internal civil wars and external pressures, especially the transatlantic slave trade. So that was the Congo Empire, which was spelt with a K. Then you had the Lumba Empire, which ran from around 1585 to 1889. This was located in the southeast of Congo, centered around Lake Opemba. It developed a hereditary monarchy supported by nobles, diviners, and a merit-based council. It was famous for ironworking and for trade. They had elaborate oral traditions and mnemonic art, like Lusaka memory boards. Forgot the memory board. They had strong religious and political institutions, which later influenced the Lunda Empire. Again, it was undermined by increased slaving and ivory trading in the 19th century. We also had the Lunda Empire that I've just mentioned. They ran from about 1665 to 1887. These all ran out around the same 20 years. Okay, there was a 20-year time when all of these different kingdoms all sort of died out, and we'll get to why that happened in a moment. You can probably guess. It's got something to do with us white people. The Lunda Empire grew from the Lumba Empire and expanded further east into Angola and Zambia. It was ruled by a Mwata Yamvo, who was a divine king, and it was known for a federated political system. It had regional autonomy for vassal state and strategic military alliance. Strategic marriage alliances were a big thing in the Lunda Empire. They controlled trade routes for copper, for ivory, and for slaves. Eventually, it was destabilized by increased demand for slaves by Arab and European traders. There was also the Yiki Kingdom, which was founded by M. Siri. He was a trader from Tanzania. It was located in Katanga, rich in copper and the crossroads of Arab, Swahili, and European trade routes. This formed in the 1850s, so this was quite a late on. It was only around for about 40 years. Masiri became a powerful warlord, controlling a large territory through military power and diplomacy. He was killed by Belgian agents during the Stairs expedition of 1891 during Leopold II's hostile takeover of the entire region. Long before colonialism, Congo had integrated trade systems, links to West Africa via the river systems and the caravan routes, East Africa and the Indian Ocean trade network via Arab Swahili merchants. There was an exchange of copper, ivory, iron tools, salt, textiles, animal skins, and later slaves, particularly after the 15th century. Markets were often managed by women, who often held key roles in local economies and trade guilds. The pre-colonial Congolese societies had customary legal systems. They had conflict resolution via elders or local chiefs. They used divination, oaths, and spirit-based justice. The punishments were often restorative, aiming at social harmony rather than incarceration. We might have had things to learn from the good folks of the various empires of what's now Congo. They had a lineage-based system which dominated matrilineal and patrilineal depending on the group. So some of them were run by matriarchs, some of them were run by patriarchs. Leadership was often spiritual as well as political, with rulers seen as divine intermediaries, which is something that we had in Europe as well, with divine right, absolutism and all that bullshit. As far as spirituality and belief systems were concerned, the religions were animist and ancestral. They were rooted in nature spirits, river gods, and honouring the dead. The important figures were Nganga, who was a spiritual healer or diviner. You also had what they call fetishes, or what we call fetishes, really, which is Nkinsi, which aren't anything to do with what you're thinking about when we say fetish. These are carved figurines believed to house spirit or protective forces. They're called fetishes. Ancestors were invoked for blessings, protection, fertility, and justice. These beliefs were highly adaptable and later sort of synchronized with Christianity and Islam. So in terms of languages, you had Kikongo, you had Tushlubi, you had Swahili, Lingala, and Luba Kantanga. Oral traditions were central. Gringotts and praise singers preserved lineage and history and cosmology. Songs, poetry, and dance reinforced social norms and storytelling. So you had this great oral tradition through the generations, which was unfortunately disrupted by Europeans. The artistic production served spiritual, political, and social purposes. The art forms include mass making, wood carvings, beadwork, and textiles. And many iconic African art pieces are now in European museums. Many of them originate from pre-colonial Congo. And then we had the slave trade coming in the 16th century. The Congo became a major source of slaves for both the Atlantic slave trade, but also the Arab Swahili trade routes to the east. Wars and raiding increased as demand for slaves grew, destabilizing traditional systems. And by the 19th century, Congolese societies were caught in a web of violence, migration, and disruption caused by... So before colonialism started, it started in earnest in 1885. So that's the big date that you need to remember for colonialism. So we had the age of slavery, which went from the 16th century until the early mid 1800s. And then in the later, you had a few years where you could argue that Africa was kind of left alone, sort of, when slavery was kind of abolished and there wasn't much in the way of colonialism, except maybe in South Africa. And then in 1885, there was a scramble for Africa. But before that happened, by the mid-19th century, traditional kingdoms were fractured. Local rulers often competed with for power with foreign traders. Coastal regions were increasingly influenced by European gunpowder, alcohol, and Christianity. The unholy trinity. This made the region vulnerable to conquest, which King Leopold II of Belgium exploited ruthlessly beginning in the 1800s. So let's talk about the Belgian Congo under Leopold II, one of the greatest villains of history. This man, okay? And I'm going to say this, you think Hitler was bad. Leopold II was arguably worse. And this was just 30 odd years before the rise of Hitler. So it's not that far away. This isn't ancient history, okay? So here's the background. So there's a scramble for Africa. In the late 19th century, European powers raced to colonize Africa, driven by economic gain, nationalism, and pseudoscientific racial theories, basically racist theories that black people couldn't look after themselves. They needed to be civilized by us white people who just went around killing each other all the time because we were so civilized. We had World War II. We had World War I, and then we had World War II. That's how civilized we were. King Leopold II of Belgium, who lived from 1835 to 1909, was obsessed with empire. Though Belgium's government had no colonial ambitions, Leopold wanted personal glory and wealth through overseas possessions. He created a private front organization called the International African Association in 1876, and he claimed that it was aimed to civilize and Christianize Africa, but it was in fact a cover for empire building and resource extraction. So this is like going in, oh, we're a charity, we're out to help you, and they absolutely 100% were not out to help anyone but themselves. They created what they called the Congo Free State in 1885. At the Berlin Conference, which ran from 1884 to 85, European nations formalized the scramble for Africa by agreeing to effective occupation on the basis of colonial claims. So if you look at a map of Africa now, you can literally point to pretty much any country in Africa, and I'll tell you who the colonial ruler of that country was. Should we have a look? So what have we got here? So we've got the DRC, that was Belgian. We've got the Equatorial Guinea, that was Spanish. We've got Gabon, that was French. We've got Cameroon, which was split between the British and the French. We've got Nigeria, which was British. We've got Benin, which was French. We've got Togo, which was German. It was part of Togoland, but then it was hived off a little bit to Benin, and the rest of it went to Togo, which was then French. Ghana was British. Cote d'Ivoire was French. Liberia was American. It was an American colony. This is where slaves went. Sierra Leone was British. Guinea was French. Guinea-Bissau was Portuguese. The Gambia was English, British. The Senegal was French. Mali was French, Burkina Faso was French, Niger was French, Chad was French, Sudan was British, South Sudan was British, Libya was Italian, Tunisia was French. I think Algeria was French, Morocco was French, Western Sahara was Spanish. Down here, Namibia was German, and then it was kind of British, but it was looked after by South Africa, which was British. But before then, it was Dutch. Lesotho was a British protectorate, so was Swaziland, Eswatini. Madagascar was French. Mozambique was Portuguese. Zimbabwe and Zambia were called North and South Rhodesia. They were both British. Malawi was British. Tanganyika was German, and then it became British. What's it called? Zanzibar down here was British, and then that merged with the rest of Tanzania, which became British after World War One. Uganda was British, Kenya was British, Somalia was Italian, or at least this part of Somalia was Italian. This part of Somalia over here was British. This was British Somalia around here, and what's now Djibouti was French Somalia. Eritrea was Italian, and yeah. So very much they looked at the map of Africa and they took it all for themselves. They just looked at the map and they carved it up. That's why there's so many straight lines in the map of Africa. The ones that aren't straight are the ones that follow rivers, usually. But you ended up with really, 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 really daft shit, like the daftest shit you could possibly imagine. Like this. Senegal here, this is one group. This is one linguistic group in history, as Senegal and the Gambia there. This was one country. Well, you know, it wasn't seen as a sort of a country in the way that we look at countries now with a border and passports and shit. But the Gambia, which is this weird worm-shaped country along the river, Gambia, this was British. The rest of it is Senegal, including this bit under here, the Casamance, which is under, like, that whole bit is, so if you want to get from Dakar to Casamance here, you have to go through someone else's country. And while the indigenous language of Senegal and Gambia is the same, the national state language of Senegal is French, and the national state language of the Gambia is English. Don't ask me why. Well, no, ask me why. It's because the English took over this bit and the bloody French took over that bit. And, you know, the people who actually lived in these places weren't given much of a choice in the matter. Anyway, so that's what happened in 1885. The European powers carved up Africa for itself, essentially. Leopold successfully convinced all the powers that he was a humanitarian ruler, promising free trade, Christian missions, and anti-slavery efforts. In 1885, he was granted personal sovereignty over the massive territory surrounding the Congo River Basin, 2.3 million kilometers squared. In other words, 76 times the size of Belgium. It was named the Congo Free State, but it was anything but free. It was Leopold's private fiefdom ruled by decree. Leopold never visited Congo. He ran it through a system of mercenary administrators, soldiers, and concession companies from his palace in Brussels. The administration was built around brutal force. The Force Publique, a colonial army of white officers and African conscripts, often kidnapped or forcibly conscripted, used to enforce quotas and punish resistance. Leopold granted vast concessions to private companies like the Anglo-Belgian India Rubber Company. So, you know, Anglo, the English are not, you know, the British are not completely, you know, exonerated from this crime that was committed. And Andavoise, giving them free rein to extract ivory and rubber. These companies operated as slave regimes with full legal authority over vast territories and the people who lived there. The rubber terror ran from the 1890s to 1908. Why rubber? Well, the late 18th century saw a boom in rubber demand with bicycles, telegraph cables, tires, and industrial use. Congo had an abundance of wild rubber vines, which required labor-intensive extraction from forests. Instead of paying workers, Leopold's regime forced entire villages to harvest rubber under threat of violence, mutilation, or death. I'm going to go into this a bit more now. Honestly, if you want to turn off now and then come back in about 10 minutes when I finish talking about it, for the sake of your mental health, you might want to do that. You know, it's fine, okay? It makes me quite upset having to read this shit. The Force Publique enforced rubber quotas using hostage-taking, wives and children, including rape as a weapon of war, to ensure compliance. Whippings with the what was called the shikot, a hippo hide whip that could kill when used in excess. Mutilation, most notoriously, the cutting off of hands. And the reason why people had their hands cut off for not getting enough fucking rubber was to save on bullets, so that bullets weren't wasted. In practice, this created a system where if a rubber collector failed to meet his quota or her quota, soldiers would kill or mutilate villagers. Hands were collected as proof of punishment for efficient use of ammunition. Villages were depopulated as men were forced to work in these rubber camps. Farming collapsed, causing famine. Women were often taken as hostages or forced into sexual slavery. Entire communities were uprooted, traumatized, or just wiped out. The entire death toll of these 20 years, not even 20 years, 18 years, is not known. But the estimate is somewhere between 8 and 10 million people. Roughly half the entire population of the country in the 1890s. Half. Murder, forced labor, starvation, disease, mutilation, and displacement. Congo was functionally a genocide, not driven by ideology, but by profit, motive, and indifference to life. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar to anything that might be happening right now in the United States of America, where everything is motivated by profit and they don't give a flying fuck about anyone who's, I don't know, a human being, human rights, human dignity, freedom, expression? Does that sound familiar? Because history repeats itself, you know? First as tragedy and then as farce. Early whistleblowers, including Ministry Roger Casement from the UK, who was actually put to death in World War I, by the way, Roger Casement, and George Washington Williams from the USA, who was of Congolese descent, were amongst the first to expose the atrocities. Casement, a British consul, published the Casement Reports in 1904, detailing mass killings, mutilations, and systematic abuse and terror. One of the most powerful exposés was by a photographer called Alice Seeley Harris, who captured images of severed hands, orphaned children, and mutilated bodies. Her photos were widely published, fueling public horror, especially in Britain and the US. This led to the Congo Reform Movement, which was founded in 1904, led by E.D. Morel, a British shipping clerk who worked for a Liverpool company in Antwerp, was it Antwerp? I think so. In Belgium, he realized guns were going into Congo, rubber was coming out, but nothing was being paid to the Congolese. He founded the Congo Reform Association, the first major international human rights movement, and they were supported by writers like Mark Twain and Arthur Conan Doyle. He is the subject of the book King Leopold's Ghost, which I can't quite believe Netflix haven't made into a movie yet. And this blew everything apart on what was happening in the Congo, because at the time, people didn't know. They covered it all up. Politicians, clergymen, and activists got involved in the Congo reform movements. There were mass rallies, there were pamphlets, and political lobbying. Public pressure forced governments to act. In 1908, facing international scandal, Leopold tried to cover up evidence, burning archives and documents. In 1908, the Belgian parliament reluctantly annexed the Congo Free State, turning it into the Belgian Congo, a formal colony under state control rather than a private fiefdom under the control of the evil the King Leopold II. Leopold died a year later in 1809, hated by many and protested at his funeral. The legacy of the Congo Free State still reverberates today. Leopold amassed a vast personal fortune, estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars, which would have been billions today. He would have been the Elon Musk of his day. He would have been the richest man in the world at the time. Much of which was used to build monuments and public works in Belgium, not in Congo. Fuck all was built in Congo. And when you go to Congo, when I said there's not much in the way of colonial architecture, yeah, because they didn't bother building anything. They didn't give a shit. They treated the Congolese people as slaves. The Congolese population was shattered with deep scars that contributed to continued instability, rebellion, and suffering well into the 20th and 21st centuries. The Congo Free State is now remembered as one of the most horrific colonial atrocities in world history, a brutal example of imperialism and racist exploitation. George Washington Williams in 1890 said, "We are not beasts and savages. If you take our land, give us fair treatment." Voices from the Reform Movement, this is from E.D. Morale, said, "I accuse Leopold II of crimes against humanity. He has made the Congo into a hell on earth." Roger Casement said, "I saw at Ikoko, which was the name of a village, a man whose hand had been cut off. He told me this was done because the rubber was short." And George Washington Williams, the African-American journalist who was an early critic of Leopold, said, "I am not a cannibal. I am not a wild animal. I am a man, and I want to be treated as a man." The photography I mentioned earlier, the visual testimonies of Alice Seeley Harris. There was this famous photograph of a man named Nasala of Walla, and there's a picture of him staring at the severed hand and foot of his 5-year-old daughter. That's the sort of shit that was going down. And worse. And when I mean and worse, if you can imagine something that's worse than that, that's what was happening in the Belgian Congo under King Leopold II's rule. Starved workers, abandoned villages, and razed fields. These images were published in lantern slide presentations, newspapers, and books, shocking audiences in London, in New York, and in Brussels. But then began the great Belgian denial and the legacy of silence, the document destruction, the cover-up, the correspondence between rubber concessionaries, reports from administrators detailing massacres and quotas, financial records of King Leopold's personal rubber empire were destroyed. And when the Congo was finally annexed in 1908 by the Belgian state, only partial archives were handed over, a move that has hindered post-colonial reckoning. And after 1908, Belgium rebranded the Congo as a modern colony. A model colony, investing in infrastructure and education, but only for the elite Congolese. Racial segregation, forced labor, and extraction of wealth continued, albeit with more bureaucracy and less overt bloodshed. The reputation of Leopold II was deliberately rehabilitated in Belgium. He was commemorated with streets named after him, with statues, with piazzas bearing his name, a royal funeral, and public monuments built with Congolese wealth. Belgium has only just recently begun reckoning with its colonial past. In 2020, during the global Black Lives Matter protests, several statues of Leopold II were vandalized or removed, quite rightly. King Philippe of Belgium issued a letter of regret to the Congolese people in 2020, but stopped short of a formal apology. Many Congolese activists and historians continue to call for reparations, repatriation of cultural artifacts, and a full public apology, which Belgium is reluctant to give. The impact of this cannot be overstated. 8 to 10 million Congolese dead, generations traumatized, entire regions depopulated. The cultural loss was almost too much to get your head around. Traditional governance systems and oral histories were destroyed. They were decimated. Indigenous social structures were replaced by foreign imposed brutality. Imagine if someone had come from another country in the 1800s to Britain and destroyed all the works of Shakespeare. All of them gone. Chaucer, gone. Swift, gone. Everything got. Frankenstein, gone. Dickens, everything by Dickens, gone. And no records kept. How would you feel about the people who came to your country and did that? Destroyed your history, took away your link to your ancestors. And then there's the economic legacy of this. Despite the vast mineral wealth, Congo remains one of the poorest nations on earth. I wonder why. Caught in a vicious cycle of resource plunder and exploitation. King Leopold's Ghost, as I've mentioned by Adam Horschild, is a definitive account of the period. I really recommend that you read it if you want to know more about what happened and how it all fell up, well, how it ended. You know, it would have ended anyway with the death of King Leopold, I guess, but yeah, at least this was shown to people. The Trouble with Congo by Séverine Orestine explores how colonial legacies fuel modern conflict. Séverine Otessa is that The Trouble with Congo, and then there's also there's a photo collection called Burden of Proof: Photography and the Congo Atrocities, which is a collection of this early humanitarian photo journalism. So the Belgian Congo came along in 1908, and that ran until 1960. This was a time of, you know, colonial rule and exploitation. They built infrastructure, railways, ports, mines, largely for just extraction purposes. It wasn't for the people of Congo. Copper, cobalt, diamonds, and uranium, which was used in the Hiroshima bomb, by the way. The Hiroshima bomb, the uranium that was used in that bomb came from the Belgian Congo, came from near Kinshasa. They were major exports. The Belgian Congo became known as a model colony, but no political freedom, poor education, and strict racial segregation. There was an independent movement in the 1950s. A Congolese middle class called Evolués emerged, inspired by Pan-Africanism and anti-colonial movements from all across Africa. Political parties formed, most notably the Mouvement National Congolais, the MNC, led by Patrice Lumumba, who I'll be talking about a lot in a moment. Independence was suddenly granted on the 30th of June 1960 following mass unrest and strikes, and Patrice Lumumba became the first prime minister with Joseph Kasavubu as president. Within weeks, the army mutinied, Belgian troops intervened, and the mineral-rich province of Katanga, backed by Belgium and foreign corporations, seceded under Mose Sombe. Lumumba turned to the Soviet Union for help, alarming the West during the Cold War. A year later, in 1961, Lumumba was captured, tortured, and executed in January 61 with involvement from Belgian authorities and the CIA. He subsequently became a symbol of African liberation and a martyr. The UN was sent on its largest peacekeeping force to date, attempting to prevent a full-scale war. Katanga was reintegrated by 1963, but violence and political instability persisted. In 1965, Mobutu Sese Seko staged a US-backed coup promising stability. He quickly established a one-party dictatorship, which he ruled over for 3 decades. He changed the country's name to Zaire in 1971 as part of an authenticity campaign, banning Western names and promoting African identity. He developed a lavish personality cult, wearing leopard skin hats and ruling with a iron-fisted flair. He amassed billions through corruption while the country's economy collapsed. Zaire became a Cold War client state, receiving Western aid in exchange for anti-communist loyalty. As the Cold War ended, foreign aid dried up. Mobutu faced growing opposition and civil unrest. He was increasingly ill and absent, and rebellions began brewing in the East. So then begins the 90s, which if you thought that the story was going to get nicer towards the end, I'm really sorry, it gets even fucking worse. So look, Mobutu Sese Seko was an absolute fucking dog. Like, the guy was a scumbag. He stole so much money from the Congolese people who lived in abject poverty while he lived in gilded palaces, and they were gilded badly. Like, there's a book by Michaela Wong, and it's called The Leopard of Africa, and it's about him. I've read it, and it's about the fall of Mobutu Sese Seko, or Seko. It's quite the read. But also Michaela Wong, she's also the person who coined the term kleptocracy, as in to talk about she coined that to talk about the Congo, Zaire as it was, and the way that Seseki ran the place. And now we can use that same word to describe what's happening in the USA right now. So Mobutu Sese Seko had ruled Zaire since 1965, a kleptocratic dictatorship propped up by Western powers during the Cold War. The Cold War ended and Western support just frittered away. Zaire was economically collapsed, it was politically unstable, and it was riddled with corruption and rebellion. In 1994, the Rwandan genocide changed everything. After the genocide, over 1 million Hutu refugees, including genocidal militias, fled into eastern Zaire, places around Goma, where we looked at on the map at the start of the show. They set up camps along the Rwandan border and began launching cross-border attacks on the new Tutsi-led Rwandan government. The first Congolese war started in 1996. The main catalyst was Rwanda and Uganda wanted to neutralize Hutu militias in eastern Zaire and to topple Mobutu, who supported them. Rwanda and Uganda backed a rebel coalition called the Alliance of Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Congo, which the acronym was AFDL. And that was led by a guy called Laurent Desire Kabila. So the war began in October 1996. The AFDL began advancing across western Zaire, toppling cities with lightning speeds, supported by Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi, and later Angola. The war was marked by the massacre of the Hutu refugees by Rwandan forces, many civilians, not just genocidaires who were the militia. There's ethnic violence against Congolese Tutsis, long scapegoated under Mobutu. And then in May 1997, Mobutu fell. He fled into exile and he died later that year in Morocco. The palace was taken over by the rebels, and they found just vast ostentatious wealth. Just he had spent so much money. He would hire Concorde to go on shopping trips with his wife to Paris. This is the amount of money this man had, while the rest of Zaire, as it was then, was living in absolute fucking poverty, the shit. And along comes this fucking war to topple him. For one man, hundreds of thousands of Congolese people died. Kabila became president, renaming the country the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC. Initially welcomed as a liberator, Kabila soon concentrated power, cut ties with Rwanda and Uganda, and alienated former allies, which led to the Second Congolese War, the Second War of the Congo, also called the Congolese World War. It is the deadliest conflict since World War II. The estimated deaths from this war, they weren't just counted in the hundreds of thousands, they were counted in the millions. 5.4 million people died. This was 25 years ago. Okay, this isn't the long distant past. This was when I was an adult, when I was going to bars and drinking, and you know, I was grown up at that time. 5.4 million deaths for a war that no fuckers ever heard of because it didn't get covered by the West. No one cared, because the people who were dying were African and it wasn't going to harm us. It wasn't like a disease. It wasn't like an outbreak of Ebola, you know, or you know, a disease, a pandemic that might affect us. It wasn't causing refugees to spill over the borders of Congo to come to the UK. So it didn't bother us. Mostly from disease, starvation, and displacement, which is how most people die in a civil war. I hated the movie Civil War that came out last year by Alex Garland just because it didn't show the real face of civil war. Most people die of starvation. Most people die of disease. Most people die curled up in a ball, shuddering in a basement somewhere. They don't go out in a heroic blaze of fucking bullets, because that's a fantasy. That is a fantasy that dickheads have in their head when they go, oh, let's have a war. Yeah, that'll sort things out. So August 1998, after falling out with Rwanda and Uganda, Kabila tried to expel Rwandan troops. Rwanda responded by backing a new rebellion, the Rally for Congolese Democracy, the RCD. Uganda backed a separate rebel group, the Movement for the Liberation of Congo, which was led by a guy called Jean-Pierre Bemba. This was a multinational war. At its peak, 9 African countries and over 25 militias were involved. Rwanda backed the rebels in the east, the RCD. They wanted to destroy Hutu militias and control mineral resources. Uganda backed the MLC and other rebel factions. They clashed with Rwanda despite being nominal allies. Angola backed Kabila to try and stop UNITA or UNITA rebels using Congo as a base. Zimbabwe sent thousands of troops to support Kabila, the president, but they also had financial interests in DRC mining. So Namibia, Sudan, Tanzania, Central African Republic, and others were involved directly or indirectly. The features of the war, there were frontline shifts were frequent, but the Eastern Congo remained the epicenter of the conflict. Tensions between Hutu and Tutsis and Lendu and Hemba and Banyarwanda and others. There were massacres, rapes, rape as a weapon of war, displacement, widespread. There was a resource war of coltan, of gold, of diamonds, of tin and timber, funding militias and foreign armies. If you had a sat phone, you could just turn up at a mine and say, right, this mine is mine. And you could do the deals with all the Western companies that were buying the stuff off you. You'll say, I'm in charge of this now. And say, okay, tell us your bank account details and we'll put the money in your bank account. And this is how they got all the way, to Kinshasa in the first war. And then the second war, they tried the same thing again. Systematic use of rape as a weapon of war. And the DRC became known as the rape capital of the world. Rwanda and Uganda were accused of looting Congolese resources as well during this time. The major events, 1999, a ceasefire agreement called the Lusaka Accord was signed but not enforced. In 2001, Laurent Kabila was assassinated by one of his bodyguards. His son, Joseph Kabila, took over aged just 29. In 2002, Sun City peace talks begin with international mediation. And in 2003, the formal peace deal was signed and Joseph Kabila, the son of the former president, became the interim president, sharing power with the former rebels. The estimated 5.4 million people who died between 1998 and 2007 mostly died from starvation, disease, lack of medical care, and mass displacement. Many were trapped in rebel-held areas with no access to aid. 2 million plus people were internally displaced, and over 500,000 women were raped or sexually assaulted. In 2006, they held elections. Joseph Kabila won against Jean-Pierre Bemba, now a VP, vice president, and former warlord. Hopes of peace faded, though, as violence in the east persisted, especially in the north and south Kivu region. Resource wars continue to this day with militia groups like the XM23, Mai Mai, the FDLR, the ADF. Continue to operate in the mineral-rich eastern provinces, and control of coltan, gold, tin, and tantalum continues to and tantalum. So that's what coltan is. It's a cobalt tantalum, and it's a mineral that they mine. And the most deposits in the world are there. Foreign companies and neighboring states have been accused of profiting from the instability there. Oh, that's not something that we'll do. I don't think people would do that, would they? And justice, well, few warlords have been held accountable. Jean-Pierre Bemba was tried in the International Criminal Court, but his conviction was overturned on appeal in 2018. Many former war criminals have been reintegrated into the army or into politics. DRC remains fragile, especially in the east. MONUSCO, the UN peacekeeping mission, is still active. It is the largest and most expensive in UN history, but violence continues, especially around Goma, Beni, and Ituri. The cycle of exploitation continues on as Western tech giants depend on Congolese cobalt and coltan. Child labour, environmental destruction and unregulated mining continues to plague the region. Calls for supply chain transparency and corporate accountability are growing, but change is slow. If you can do something after watching this, if you are feeling as enraged as I am, maybe write to your MP saying, hey, what are we doing about the transparency of the coltan in our mobile phones? Can you let us know can we find out where the coltans come from? Thank you. Maybe do that. So, Western tech giants depend on Congolese cobalt and coltan, child labour, environmental destruction, unregulated mines. They continue to just destroy what hope there is for the DRC to get back on its feet. There's a few documentaries that you can watch. There's Crisis in Congo, Uncovering the Truth, which is a documentary. This is Congo, which was a 2017 documentary about soldiers, rebels, and civilians. There's also books, Dancing in the Glory of Monsters by Jason Stearns and Africa's World War by Gerard Prunier. Post-war transition and turmoil. You had the transition government from 2003 to 2008, power-sharing government, which was formed with Kabila's allies and former rebels. In 2001, just after his father was assassinated, Joseph became president at just 29 years old, as I mentioned. The 2006 elections are the first free elections in 40 years, and Joseph Kabila won against Jean-Pierre Bemba amid violence and alleged fraud. The conflicts just continued in the east with armed groups like, as I mentioned before, like CNDP and the M23, backed by Rwanda and Uganda, and they continued to wreak havoc. Which is when you look at the Tories' Rwanda policy, like there was someone in Question Time saying, "I'm from the Democratic Republic of Congo." Like, what if someone's from the Democratic Republic of Congo and they've come here to get away from the Rwandans attacking them, and you send them to Rwanda? Yeah. There was the 2011 and election and political crisis. Kabila was re-elected in 2011 amid Kabila, sorry, I keep mispronouncing his name, it's Kabila, was re-elected amid irregularities. His refusal to step down in 2016 after his term expired led to mass protests and unrest. Modern DRC, we've got the 2018 election and historic transfer of power. After many years of delay, elections were held in December 2018. The opposition leader, Felix, I'm going to say this right, Tshisekedi, was declared the winner in a controversial and disputed election, but it marked the first peaceful transfer of power since independence. The current challenges include armed groups that I've mentioned remaining active in the east, and the DRC also faces, on top of that, Ebola outbreaks, measles epidemics, and dealing with COVID-19 with limited health infrastructure. Despite being one of the richest countries in the world in natural resources, the DRC remains one of the poorest countries in the world, a beggar on the throne of gold, plagued by corruption, conflict, and foreign exploitation, which extends to this day. The DRC supplies over 60% of the world's cobalt, essential for smartphones and electric cars and renewable energy tech. And like I say, child labour, dangerous conditions, environmental degradation persist in mining regions. The DRC remains a nation of extraordinary potential, facing deep structural challenges, but bursting with creativity, music, resilience, and a young, hopeful population. And I don't want the words of Mario Vargas Llosa, who said, "Congo is not a country. Congo is a tragedy." I don't want that to be the case for the rest of my life. That's what I'll say on that. It's a country that is a symphony of cultures, resilience, and untold beauty. Untapped beauty, not resources, not digging stuff out the ground, not making money for people who already have more money than sense, but to actually look at like what we can do as humans with a place like this that needs looking after. The lungs of the world, the Congolese basin, the rainforest that's there, the different medicines we might find, the different, the carbon sink that it provides. This is a treasure that we just take for granted because we know that it's a country that can't fight back, and we bully it. We absolutely bully it. So yeah, that was Congo. I'm sorry I went a bit over time, but it's a history of a country that I really wanted to tell. I spent a week or so in Kinshasa trying to get a visa. Well, I already had a visa for Angola, but it ran out and it was printed, so I couldn't just change it with a pen, which is what I normally did. I normally just like forge the date of entry with a pen on some of my visas in my passport, but this is actually printed in there. So I had to get another one, and I ended up getting a 5-day visa for Angola. 5 days, and I was like, oh yeah, that's enough. That's enough to get through Angola. Yeah, it wasn't enough. I literally, at the end of the 5th day, I ran across the border, which closed at 6 o'clock, and I got there on the bus at 6 o'clock. And I remember, like, they were closing the gates of the border, and I'm, like, running with my passport going, wait! But yeah, so I had a week in Kinshasa. I hung out with people who were working for the UN, Operation Damien, people who were working for Medicine Sans Frontier. And it was great. And the local people I met were lovely. Like, they weren't... they treated me with respect. They didn't seem to hold any animosity to me, which I thought was amazing, because if I had gone through what the people of Congo had gone through, I would feel animosity to any white person I saw. That's just me. But yeah, and there are parts of Kinshasa. It's a very noisy, polluted, concrete city, but there are parts that are quite nice, surprisingly quiet. You find a little church and somewhere you can sit off and have a little bit of a break. Kinshasa itself was once called Kinshasa la Belle, Kinshasa the Beautiful, when the Belgians were building shit for themselves. But as soon as they left, they trashed the place on the way out. They left only 16 university graduates in the whole country when they pulled out in 1960. That was the transition. 16 university graduates in a country of millions. And these colonial buildings, they fell into rack and ruin, into disrepair. And now Kinshasa is known as Kin La Poubelle. Instead of Kinshasa La Belle, like beautiful, Poubelle as in bin. And that's not the way it should be. The DRC should be one of the richest countries in the world, because it's got all the resources that we need. Resources from the DRC are probably in the stuff that you use every day and I use every day. And it is not fair by any stretch of the imagination that the people of the DRC never benefit from the minerals, the resources that we extract from this place. Same story told out, all across Africa, but it's particularly pertinent in the DRC, considering their history, considering the interference from foreign powers, back in the scramble for Africa, all the way through the era of colonization, and then interference from the neighboring countries. The reason why those two wars happened was a fallout, essentially, from the Rwandan genocide of 1994, in which 800,000 people were murdered, hacked to death with machetes in the space of just a few weeks. One of the arguments that dickheads come out with when they're trying to deny the Holocaust is like, how could you kill that many people in such a short space of time? Yeah, there's ways. So yeah, next time you use your phone, think about the Democratic Republic of Congo. Maybe send your MP a message about it and say, hey, any chance we could get British companies that exploit the resources of the DRC to actually have to, be transparent about where they're getting it from? Especially as Goma at the moment is under the control of a militia group that took it over a few months ago, with the backing of Rwanda, with the backing of Paul Kagame, the leader of Rwanda. So anyway, right. I'm going to get off now. That was I won't say potted history of DRC, but it was quite comprehensive in the end, wasn't it? Simon Smith said, in the 1990s, Anglo-Canadian mining firm SNC Lavian moved into exploit copper, cobalt belt in southern Zaire, DRC. Yeah, they did. Graham is a skin version of Encyclopedia Britannica, says Bruce Music. There is an African Union. There is an African Union with 54 members. I think there's one country in Africa that's not a member, but Western Sahara is a member. So there you go. Anyway, if you want to find out more about all that shit, I'll be back next week. We'll be going to Denmark. So we'll be coming back to Europe for another slice of European pie. We're going to Denmark, land of Legoland, the land of Lego, and the land of Legoland, and also the land of Copenhagen, the capital, and Tivoli, the oldest amusement park that's still in continuous existence is in Denmark. There's actually two of them. There's one that dates back like 500 years, but Tivoli is the one that everyone thinks of because it's actually got roller coasters. I've got a lot of family ties in Denmark. My auntie married a Dane, and so my two nephews are Danish, and their wives are Danish, their kids are Danish, and I go over there quite often to see my family over there. So it should be a good one. It should be a good one next week. A little bit more uplifting about Denmark than that. So there you go. Billy Kershaw, that was Bloomy Marvelous. Hats off, game. Oh, thank you very much. Can I keep my hat on? Hey. So thanks very much for watching. I'll be back tomorrow morning with the 531st episode of Morning Brew. So if you want to join me for that at 9 o'clock, you're very welcome to do so. At 1 o'clock, I'll be talking very seriously to Phil Morehouse about the spring statements this week. And then in the evening, I'd love you to join us for the Friday night social, when we'll be having lots of fun on the Friday night with our friends down the pub, the virtual pub, and putting the world to rights and telling a few jokes about how stupid the people who are running America right now are. So until then, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for the chat. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.